Okay, I want to welcome everyone to this Keynote speaker session with Peter Lucantoni, who has many friends joining him today.
Yes.
And he is back by popular demand. He was part of our conference last year, and we had so many nice comments, and they asked, please, could he return? And he will be moderating our closing ceremony tomorrow at, I think it's what, 5 or 5:30. You can see everybody. All you have to do is go to our conference schedule on the Tesol Kuwait homepage. But let's get started here because I know you want to hear what Peter has to say, and we want to have time for your questions for him. Peter Lucantoni has had a long career in English language teaching. He also has experience in teacher training and management, both in Europe and the Middle East, and now he's based in Cyprus. He's the author and co-author of a range of popular course books for students, including Cambridge IGCSE, English as a Second Language, and Introduction to English as a Second Language. Both of these are published by Cambridge University Press. He is a professional learning and development manager for Cambridge University Press in the MENA region. He regularly speaks at ELT conferences. He trains teachers internationally in both the public and private sectors. Peter's interests are in teacher learning and development and in the transition from teacher to teacher educator. Thank you so much for joining us. Peter, would you please go ahead with your presentation?
Okay, thanks so much, Anne, for the lovely welcome. And thank you, everybody who's joining today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening. It's great to see so many names. Sorry I can't be there, with you in person to see you, but such is life at the moment. So as Anne said, my name's Peter Lucantoni, got a long background in English language teaching, school ownership, manager, and so on and so forth. I'm also an author for Cambridge University Press and Assessment. And what I'm going to be talking about today is teacher development or teacher learning. And I hope to be able to draw a few examples from my recent book, which I wrote with my friend and colleague, Matt Ellman, who also works for Cambridge. He's based in the UK, but we published this last year, From Teacher to Trainer. So what I want to try and cover today, really 4 key points. First of all, we're going to have a think about what we are aiming for in the teacher learning process. We're also going to talk about what we mean by impact. And we're going to look at the process of developing teacher learning, what it means and how we actually do it. And we'll link that with 4 specific steps that I think we should be focusing on in the process of developing teacher learning. And then we'll have a summary. And of course, as Anna said, hopefully there'll be time for questions towards the end. So the first thing I want to do is to have a little think about what are we actually aiming for in teacher learning. So I'd really like to hear your thoughts and comments here. So just very quickly, I think you can use your microphones. If not, just quickly type in the chat box. I can see it. So if you just want to very quickly type in the chat box, any ideas? What are we aiming for in teacher learning? No right or wrong answers. Hoda has her hand up, so if you want to switch your microphone on. Can they use their microphones, Tesol Kuwait, or not? Yes, they can. Go on.
Okay, thank you for being here in this webinar. I think teacher learning is about speaking about professional development and aiming at being up to date to the latest trends in teaching around the world.
Yeah, great, good. And there are lots of things coming in the chat box. Unskill our teaching skills, improve student learning. Thank you, Altaf. That's a good one, isn't it? Professional development training, better outcomes, change lives. Yeah. Hopefully you mean the students' lives. Yeah. Personal development, helping education, get well. Yeah. Loads and loads and loads and loads of comments. Essengor says I think it's a lady. She's been teaching for 25 years. So teacher learning is to keep up to date and not to fossilize. I think that's great. So thanks for all the comments. We can't look at all of them. What I want to show you is a quote which I came across last week at the Cambridge Academic Conference. And my colleague, Dr. Hisham Al-Sagbini, who's also presenting, I think he presented today, and he'll be in the panel discussion tomorrow. He put a wonderful quote up on the screen, and I couldn't resist stealing it. And I must admit, this is the second time in a week that I've used it, because I just think it's such a brilliant quote. So I'm going to put it on the screen and just give you 30 seconds to have a quick look. Isn't that great? Every teacher needs to improve, not because they're not good enough, but because they can be even better. And I think sometimes we forget about the good job that teachers are doing, and how much hard work it is, and how challenging it is, and how demanding teacher can actually be. And sometimes the idea of a teacher learning, maybe there's a sort of a negative idea about it, that we're doing it because teachers are not doing things in the right way, and teachers need to get better, and teachers need to improve. But that's not what it is. It is at all. Yes, we all need to improve. It doesn't matter who you are or how much experience you've got. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher or a trainer. We all need to improve, but it doesn't suggest that we're not doing a good job. It's because everybody can always do better. So I thank my colleague, Dr. Hisham, for putting the words of Dylan William from University College London into one of his presentations, because I think it's really important to kick off this session in a really very positive way. So what I'd like to do is just have a think. I want you to have a think about who you are, which may sound a bit weird, but I want you to think about who you are and the role that you currently have, or possibly even the roles, plural, that you have. So are you one of these? A teacher, and you manage your own development. In other words, you make choices about your development. I suspect that many of you here today, you made a conscious decision to attend Tesol Kuwait. Nobody said to you, you have to attend, or maybe they did. Or are you B, a trainer or a mentor or a manager who manages other people's development? In other words, you make decisions about the people in group A. Or maybe you're somebody completely different. Now, obviously, I can't possibly get responses for everybody, but it would be good, I think, just to quickly see in the chat box, just very quickly in the chat box, just type if you're A, B, or C. I think it'll be interesting to see. Okay, lots of A's. I'm scrolling as quickly as I can. Some of you are A, B, and C. Anne is A, B, and C. Great. A and B, A and B, A, B, A. I think mostly A's. Some A's and B's. I haven't yet seen. Yeah, there's a couple of B's. Ali R is a B. And Tahani is a B, but mostly people are putting themselves into category. That's fine. It's not a test or an evaluation of you. It's just interesting to know who's actually here, which I think is actually really great, because it means if you're putting yourself down as A, you have made a conscious decision to attend today. And of course, for you, today is your weekend. So it's even more impressive that you've made that effort to attend today. So it says at the top of the screen, what are we aiming for in teacher learning? But maybe change that pronoun from we, change it to you. So what are you aiming for in teacher learning? So I put 3 pieces of information on the screen, and we need to uncover the missing words. So for some of them, I've given you some clues. First one begins with I, second one begins with C, the third one, there's no clue, and the fourth one ends with ing. So what about the first one, the first bullet? What are we aiming for? Sustained what? Lots of people are saying improvement, instruction, I can see as well, okay? It's actually improvements, yeah. What we're looking for in teacher learning is sustained. Remember, sustained means over a period of time. Sustained improvements in teaching knowledge and in teaching practice. So we've got the two things there. We've got the theory. Yes, we need improvement and understanding about the knowledge and the ideas of teaching, but also, of course, probably more importantly, is the practice. What about the next one, beginning with C? Something that are context sensitive. I can hear classes, class, content, communication skills, courses, lots of C words coming up. Lots of people think classes and content, courses, content, context, class. Okay, let me put you out of your misery. It's actually changes. In other words, classroom changes, changes in student behaviors, changes in student learning that are sensitive to that particular context. Let's remember that what works here may not necessarily work there. It doesn't mean that one is better and one is worse. It just means that different things work in different places. And then the third bullet. Lots of children attending today, I can hear. You need to put your microphones on mute. Children are very welcome, but they might not be able to understand me. So yes, the first word is impact, positive impact on student learning. Absolutely, brilliant. But question, what do we mean by the word impact? So there's the question. What do we mean by impact? Quickly, in the chat box, or turn on your mic if you want. Nice one from Soma, to cause change. Yeah. Majid talks about positivity. Yeah, positive influence, good influence, effect, positive influence, influence. Lots of people using the word influence. Dr. Shoba says impact. Yeah, impact learning. Mariam uses learning. Dildora says affect. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. So what do we mean by impact? Well, impact should be the result of three things. And I'm going to talk more about these today. Impact needs to be the result of input, implementation. So we put input and implementation together, and we should have impact at the end of it. Now, what you're doing now, what we are doing together now, is an example of input. We're learning together. But the next step, the implementation, is up to you. I can't help you with that. I can help you with the input, but I can't help you with the implementation, because that's in your hands. You need to take the input and take it into the classroom. And that's where the impact actually happens. So just carrying on with this idea of impact, there's a lot of research, a lot of writing about impact. So let's have a look at what some of the experts say. This is from Silvana Richardson and Diaz Majoli. They make a direct connection between teacher learning and what goes on in the classroom. And they say this. Now, CPD here is just another term for teacher learning. It's continuous professional development, but it doesn't really matter whether you call it teacher learning or teacher development or whatever. We know what we're talking about. But the main goal of it, the main goal of you being here today, is to effect changes in teaching so that it results in enhanced student learning. Now, my talk today is called A Recipe for Teacher Learning, and that's not a mistake. It is a recipe for teacher learning, but the whole purpose of teacher learning is enhanced student learning. And if that doesn't result, then something is going wrong in the whole of the teacher learning process. I want to show you one more quote from a gentleman called Martin Parrott, who, if you're as old as me, you'll remember Martin Parrott from International House days, wrote several methodology books about English language teaching. And he says this, when responding to this question about what do we mean by input. So he's reinforcing basically what we saw in the previous quote and what, indeed what I'm saying and what you're putting in the chat box, that the goal of teacher education or teacher learning or CPD should be more effective learning, he says, of English, because that's his field, but it could be geography, it could be maths, it could be Arabic, it could be whatever you want, by pupils and students. So everything that we're doing, the whole reason for your being here today, and hopefully tomorrow as well, is that we want to have an impact on what goes on in the classroom. So let's have a think now about the process. How can we actually develop teacher learning? What can we do to instill, if you like, teacher learning and the development of teachers? And I think there are several things that we can consider. First of all, we need to consider the aims. We need to consider the aims of what it is that we're trying to do. And sorry, just before I look at that, I'm going to just quickly go to the chat box and see what I've missed. What is CPD? Yeah, thank you, Majid. Yeah. Al's, his grammar book is one of the best, referring to Martin Parrott. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, great. Good. Thank you. Keep your comments coming. It's really good. So, a joint decision on aims. In other words, just have a think for a second. Who is it who normally makes decisions about teacher learning? Now, one of the reasons I asked you at the beginning if you were A, B, or C was to establish who's actually here in the room. And as I said, if you were a teacher, you probably made the decision yourself to be here today and tomorrow. You weren't forced into doing it. So it's a decision that you made. But talking about the process of professional development or developing teacher learning, we need to consider various aspects of teacher learning. The first one is what to develop. The second one is the reason for doing it. And the third one is who is deciding. So when I say joint decision on aims, this means between the teacher and the authority, the administration, the manager, the level leader, whoever it might be. So we need to consider what needs to develop. What does the teacher want to focus on? Why? Why do you need to focus on that? And who decides? That's the critical one. Who actually decides? Now, it's not a criticism to say that in many contexts, teachers have little input in the decision-making process. They're told, Wednesday, 4 p.m. in room 6, you're having a session on XYZ. Or Saturday, 10 o'clock online, here's the link, you're having a session on XYZ. And that decision has been made by somebody who has not had the opportunity to find out what teachers actually really want, or what they really need. And of course, the only way that you can find out what teachers want and what they need is by having joint decisions on aims. There has to be a conversation, there has to be a communication going between teachers and the organizers. And I think what we also need to remember here, very, very importantly, is that learning cannot be forced. You know the expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can lead a camel to water, but you can't make it drink. And this whole idea about forcing people to do something that they don't want to do is probably not a very effective thing to do. So one of the first things that we need to understand, one of the first things that we need to implement when we're talking about this process of developing teacher learning is to make sure that we're involving all the stakeholders in the decision making process. That's the first thing. Second thing we need to do is to plan the teacher development, the teacher learning, the work, if you prefer, over an extended period, if possible. It's not always possible, of course. Lots of the training that I do, or lots of the work that I do with teachers, unfortunately, it's just a one-off event, and I probably never see them again. But I'm actually very lucky because I work for Cambridge, an organisation which invests very heavily in supporting teachers, and a lot of the teachers that we work with, not just in the MENA region, which of course I'm very familiar with, but globally, we do work with teachers over an extended period of time. I can think of one example in Saudi Arabia, a university there. We've been working, well, I've been directly working with them for more than 10 years. And the the impact of that and the positive outcome of that goes without question. Short is obviously okay, but if we can make it sustained over a period of time, and if it can be regular, it's likely to be much more impactful. So what I mean by this is, yes, you could do a 2 or a 3 week training course and it would be extremely useful. But if nothing happens after that, then I think its usefulness is probably going to drop off quite quickly. So instead of doing 2 or 3 weeks altogether, maybe spread the days out over an academic year, so it becomes more of a regular event, then I think it's likely to be much, much more positive. And again, the research supports this. This is a quote from Cordingley, who says this: prolonged or extended teacher learning interventions were found, more or less universally, to be more effective than shorter ones. Most reported programs lasted at least 2 terms, 2 semesters, more commonly a year, and in some instances, even multiple years. So the research supports this idea of a sustained approach to teacher learning. It can't just be a one-off or a quick event. We're not saying they're no good, absolutely not. Of course they are. But if we can sustain development over a period of time, it's much more likely to be more effective. So we've looked at 2 things. We've looked at joint decision on aims, and we've looked at the idea that we need to plan over a period of time. Third thing that we need to consider is the environment within which all of these decisions and all of the training is actually happening. And I think we can complete this by saying that the right environment has to be both positive and supportive. And we're going to look now at what I actually mean by this. But the environment is the context within which the teacher is going through this process of teacher learning. So what do I mean by positive and supportive? Well, I think first of all, there needs to be some sort of order and discipline in the context within which the teacher is working. I don't mean that it needs to be dogmatic and dictatorial, but I just mean that there needs to be a system in place for professional development for teachers. I think also very importantly is that teachers benefit from each other's skills and experience. It's not just about getting a trainer to come in. It's also about teachers working together. So I think peer collaboration between teachers is really, really important. Ironically, in some of the places that I've worked at over the years, particularly in higher education, I see that teachers are hiding away in little offices on their own, rather than working in open staff rooms where everybody's together. And I think it's quite sad that, you know, when a teacher has finished a lesson, they can go to their office and shut the door, and they may not see another teacher, you know, from one week to the next. And I think that's a great shame, because I think we can learn so much from talking to our colleagues. This was one of another disadvantages, of course, wasn't it, during the pandemic and COVID, where we suddenly all went home and had to work from home. That collaboration with colleagues disappeared for 2 years, unless you did it online, but that's not the same. I mean, going down the corridor and bumping into somebody and having a quick chat about something, that can be incredibly valuable. So this is another part of what we mean by a positive and supportive environment. Probably one of the most important things that we need to ensure is in place is that the leadership, the administration, the management, whatever you want to call it, the people, if you like, above the teachers in terms of administrative rank, actually listen to teachers and consciously support them. It's really important that we talk to the ones who are involved in the teacher learning. It's really, really important. I'm just jumping to the chat box for a second. Fatima says that she and her colleagues do collaborate with each other and it's fruitful. That's brilliant. Good. Jagana, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, says peer teaching could help. Absolutely. Yep. Hussein is talking about institutions playing a role. Very, very good. Margie says mostly in the Middle East. Well, I'm not going to say that. Nahla talks about how can a university cooperate with Cambridge to have teacher learning? Send me an email. I can help you with that. Nara is saying peer collaboration is very important. Yeah. Okay, great, brilliant. So I think most people are on the same page as me with all of this. We all agree. So yes, we need all of these elements, but of course we also need opportunities. It's no good, having a great environment and all of these bits and pieces and loads of support if there isn't actually any opportunity to develop professionally. So yes, let's make things available to teachers. Let's provide them with information about what's available, like Tesol Kuwait, like Tesol in the UK, and all of the other things that are available. We need to give teachers opportunities to actually engage with these professional development opportunities. And I'm not criticizing anybody, because I know what it's like out there in the real world. But asking teachers to attend professional development on a Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock, after they finish the working week, they're exhausted and they just want to be home with their families. Why would you do that? It doesn't make sense. It's much better if we can find opportunities for teachers to come out of the classroom, do some professional development, do some teacher learning, and then go back into the classroom. And I know all the problems with this, but who's going to teach their classes and so on. But I think if there's a real will, if there really is leadership, then you can overcome those challenges. It's not impossible to arrange things if we really believe in developing teacher learning. And I think that links really with the last point I want to make on this question, is that we need within the organization a culture of trust. We need to trust each other. We need to trust teachers. We need to have respect between everybody who's involved, all of the stakeholders. And there needs to be a degree of openness about the professional development, the teacher learning, and what's needed and what isn't needed, and so on and so forth. The chat number is jumping up, so I'm just going to have a quick look. Habib says that CPD is both top down and bottom. It certainly is. What else have we got? Tons of videos on CPD are available online, TED Talks, YouTube. Thank you, Margin. Absolutely. If you're in Group A and you do this of your own volition, then absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Ma talks about visiting other classrooms. Yeah, okay, great. Nice comments coming in. Good. Okay, I've got one more point that I want to make on this particular point. So we've talked about the necessity for joint decisions. We've talked about the necessity to do teacher learning over an extended period. And we've also just been talking about the right environment. And now probably the most important thing is that we need to think about the input and prepare the input that we need in order to develop teacher learning. And this is where I just want to jump into my recent book that I wrote with Matt Ellman. What we say in our book is that successful teacher training input really needs three elements, or three feeds, if you like. So input needs to have practical elements, it needs to have personal elements, and it needs to have professional elements. All of these are key in any successful teacher learning or CPD or teacher development, or whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to have a quick look at what these three things actually mean. The first one then is the practical, and practical is not a trick word. It is what it says. Practical is practical, and I want to make a point here that for input and for teacher learning to be effective, we can consider two classroom scenarios, if you like, for two different things. The first scenario that we need is for noticing teaching. In other words, we need a classroom where teachers can notice teaching. So this could be a demonstration class where teachers observe. It could be one of your colleagues' classes. And somebody mentioned earlier in the chat box, wrote a comment about peer observation, so observing each other. Another one could be watching something on video, and somebody was just saying about all of the content there is on YouTube and TED Talks and so on and so forth. So there are endless opportunities for noticing teaching. And the reason that we need to notice teaching is so that we can learn from what other people are doing. We can imitate, we can model what other people are doing, not because what we're doing is wrong, but because we can learn and improve and get better by seeing what other people are doing. We also, of course, need the second classroom, and the second classroom is for actually doing it. So first of all, we need to notice what's going on, but then secondly, we need an opportunity to actually practice what we've seen, to put into practice what we've seen. So this could be micro-teaching. If you're in a workshop with a trainer and other teachers, you could, in little groups, do little bits of micro-teaching. So you're actually practicing things that you've learned and you've understood. It could be teaching practice on a training course like CELTA or Delta, or any other training courses which are available for language teaching. Many of them include opportunities to do teaching practice where you're observed and given feedback. And indeed, it could be your own class that you're teaching on a regular basis that you see 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week. So the practical element of input is opportunities for both noticing and for practicing. The second one is the professional. And what we mean by professional, what Matt and I want to get across, is this idea of expert input. And what we mean by this is all of the terminology and all of the words and all of the acronyms that we use in our profession, all of the theories, all of the research, everything that's going on in the background, if you like. And I've already shown you 3, I think, 3 or possibly 4 quotes based on research which are particularly relevant to what we're talking about today. So it's really important that trainers provide teachers with that background, because it makes what we're saying and what we're talking about and eventually what we want teachers to do to be much, much more credible. So this is about terminology, it's about theories, it's about research and methodologies. Why is this so important? Well, everything that we're talking about today is important because the first point you're going to see now is we want to get the best results for our learners. That's the most important thing. That's what we're looking for. Remember, we had the word impact earlier. This is why expert input is so important, is because we want to get the best results for our learners. But also, it means that teachers are able to access everything that's out there, all of that wealth of information. They can access resources independently, and that enables them to actually develop further. There's also the learning element, isn't there? That by looking at research, by looking what other people have said and done, it means that teachers can learn from other people. And it also expands, doesn't it, your horizon. So you're not just thinking about your context, but you're also going beyond your context and learning things from different perspectives. I think that's another important reason why we need expert input. And I think the fourth one is helping us to understand how we can actually adapt the things that we're currently doing in the classroom. It's very easy, isn't it, just to keep doing things in the same way, to get stuck in a rut or in a box and not go beyond that. And I think if we're receiving expert input as part of our professional learning journey, then that's going to help us to understand more excuse me, about how and when we should be adapting things. Now, obviously today and tomorrow and any conference that you attend, you'll be getting lots of expert input, but independently, and just putting TED Talks and YouTube to one side for a moment, there are plenty of other ways that you can do. I just put some ways on the screen here. The one on the left is obviously involves money. You need to buy books, but the other 3, these are all free. You can go to any of the URLs in the white boxes, and you can find loads and loads and loads of relevant information. Obviously, it needs a bit of time. You need to sit down with a computer and start searching. But Cambridge has so much information so much wealth of knowledge and research, which is free. So it doesn't need, you don't need to attend a conference. You can easily find stuff online. And another great source, something which is relatively new to me, is this OASIS, Open Accessible Summaries in Language Studies. So again, you need to sit down, you need to play around for a bit, but if you just sign up, and it's 100% free, sign up to OASIS, it will provide you with one-page summaries of research. And a one-page summary is brilliant because you can very quickly see if it's what you need or if it's what you're interested in. This is from the University of York in the UK. So the expert input is out there. It's all there for you. You just need to find a bit of time to do your own research and to find what you need. Okay, and then the third thing is the personal. And what we mean here is you. It's the people involved in the learning, and it's your understanding and your knowledge of the local context, because it doesn't matter what the research is, or what the TED Talk video is, or what the YouTube videos, or what Peter says, or anybody else says. You need to be thinking about your own particular context, because every context is different. Even within the Middle East, you can't compare a teaching context in Kuwait City with a teaching context in Jeddah or over in Nizwa in Oman. They're all different. They're all very, very different. I know, because I've been to all of them. I know very well how different they all are. So it's really important that teacher learning takes account of this personal element. In other words, the characteristics and the needs of people in a particular context. So a good trainer will find out about the individual teacher, what their beliefs are, what their opinions are, what their knowledge is, what their understanding is, what their experience is. As trainers, we must never assume that we know better. Of course we don't. We know different things, but we certainly don't know better. And quite likely, a group of teachers will know more than a trainer in different areas. So this is where the personal element comes in. It's really important that we don't forget when we're doing input in the teacher learning journey that we consider this personal element. And very importantly here, of course, it's only the teacher who can bridge the gap between the input and the classroom. Remember, we had this word impact earlier. It doesn't matter how great the conference is, or how great the workshop is, or how great the teacher learning journey is. It's only going to be really effective if the teacher takes it and tries things out in the classroom. So just as an example of this, one thing that this is taken from the book that Matt and I wrote, but I use it quite often with teachers, is just to consider scenarios like this. You don't have to answer, but just to give you an idea, is to look at the question associated with these two pictures. What differences do you notice? What it doesn't say is what are the advantages and the disadvantages, because you immediately look at those two scenarios, and probably, I could be wrong, but probably you look at the one on the left and you think, oh, lecture, horrible, no, not good. And you look at the one on the right, group work, yeah, brilliant, wonderful. Which up to a point is true, but it's not possible to always have students in groups. It doesn't always work because of numbers, because of the physical environment that you're in. So the one on the left is not bad, it's just different, and we need to find different ways of dealing with it. On the other hand, on the picture on the right, the group work, sometimes it might be better to have students in rows and just listening and taking in what somebody's actually talking about. So this local context idea from the personal side is really very important, and we need to always be empathetic, I think, with teachers in trying to understand where they're coming from. Okay, so the 4 input steps then. The first step is that we put together those 3 Ps, the professional, the personal, and the practical. That's all of our input. And then we're going to move through the implementation into the practical. If you remember, I showed you earlier this idea from the book that Matt and I wrote, this idea of practical, personal, and professional. We need all of these elements to be seen in the training, in the teacher learning that we're doing. They all need to be there. They don't have to be in that order. They can be in any order. They don't have to be 30%, 30%, 30%. They can be split up. There can be different levels, but they all need to be there if we want teacher learning to be effective. So just some examples of what it can look like in practice. That's me down there on the bottom left. That was me in Saudi a couple of weeks ago. You've got some examples of teachers working together. You've got the guys in Saudi there at a flip chart, actually writing and working together. Got an example of somebody doing an online webinar, and over on the right you've got some teachers, I think that was in Abu Dhabi, working with a book, working in pairs. So the examples I'm showing you here are examples of how teachers can get their input. And of course, this is the practical side of what we've been talking about. On the personal side, I think it's important, and I hope you'll do this after tomorrow when the conference is over. If you're not, even if you're not, maybe you're doing it already, but after the input, after that, the practical side of the input, we need to start making plans. Don't just forget this weekend or tick a box or take your certificate and say, right, I've done that. No, you need to start making plans to implement changes in your classroom or classrooms. And you need to start asking yourself questions like, what's going to happen? What am I taking from what I've seen this weekend? When am I going to do it? And what are the problems that might arise? Is there anything that's going to prevent me from doing what I want to do? So what problems might come up? And of course, you know what the next question is? How am I going to solve them? So after the input, after you've attended the workshop, after you've done the webinar, after you've been at Tesol Kuwait, you need to start asking yourself these particular questions. And just to put that in an example, maybe you've attended a workshop on CCQs, concept checking questions. This teacher has decided that he's going to actually write CCQs in a lesson plan for the vocabulary that he teaches. Maybe that's not something that he's done previously. He knew what vocab he was going to teach, but he hadn't actually decided on his CCQs before the lesson. He just made them up in the lesson itself. And of course, that is not always the best thing to do. So this teacher is deciding that he's going to do that. He's worried, though, that there might be some words that come up in the class that he hasn't thought about, he wasn't expecting. So he's going to find a solution for that. And his CCQs will be based on the grammar of the new vocabulary. For example, is it a noun or is it a verb, and so on and so forth. So that's just an example of how a teacher might implement something they've seen in a workshop. And then the third step is just more practical. So once you've done it, you need to reflect on it. And once you've made the plan, then you actually need to do it. So you go into the classroom and you do the practical side of it. You actually do the teaching as planned, and maybe reflect on it and consider it and think about it and decide how many times you want to do it. But you need to do things more than once. I know it's easy to try something, it doesn't work, so you say no good, but you need to give new ideas and new activities a bit of time. So don't just reject things immediately, but try different opportunities to try things out with different classes, because what works in one class may not work in another, and vice versa. And during all of this process, we need, of course, to be checking on ourselves. We need to be checking on whether or not what you're doing has actually been impactful. So you need to think of different ways that you can check if what you're doing has actually been impactful. You need to evaluate the impact of what you're doing. And of course, if it's not, then you need to make some changes. And possibly, whoops, wrong way, possibly you need to go back and repeat step 3. So checking impact, you could ask colleagues. Maybe you could get somebody to come in and observe your lesson. You could video yourself, or you could audio record yourself and ask somebody to watch it or listen to it, and to evaluate and to give you some feedback. It doesn't have to be somebody sitting in the back of the classroom. It doesn't even have to be for the whole lesson. It could just be for the 10 minutes in the lesson where you're doing the new procedure. So it doesn't have to be a massive, complicated event, getting people to observe your lessons. It could just be a snapshot of the lesson. Ask students for feedback. Now you may think, oh no, I can't do that, but why not? Ask students for feedback and maybe give them a questionnaire, or ask them to write something about their experience of the new activity or the new procedure, or whatever it was. Of course, the students themselves, without knowing it, are an indication of how impactful whatever it is that you're doing. So, you introduce something new that you've learned in a workshop or a webinar or whatever, and then you take from the students, you listen to them or you read their work. And that's a very, very good way to find out about whether or not what you've done has actually been impactful. And I think also journals are quite a good way, aren't they, to keep a record of what's going on, and then you can look at it over a period of time and see whether or not what you're doing has actually been impactful. I just quickly go into the chat box because there's lots and lots of comments coming in. Where are we? People observing student performance afterwards is a great way to check impact. Thank you, Altaf. Yeah, nice comment there, Majid. Motivation to do the task. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very good. Lots of people putting their email addresses in. Asking students, absolutely. Yeah, getting feedback from students. I don't know why all these email addresses are coming in. Yeah, Suleiman, nice. Thank you, Suleiman. Graham Workman's book, CCQs and Timelines, is an absolute game changer. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, great. Okay, lovely. So we're nearly out of time. So quick summary about what we've been talking about. I think summaries for teachers need to be from you to me, not me to you. But because we're online, we're going to make it two-way. So I'm going to give you a summary, but I've removed some words. And you need to tell me what the missing words actually are. So what's the first one? Nara and Mohammed are saying teacher, 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 teacher. Let's have a look. Yeah, so the goal of teacher learning, which is what we've been talking about today, is better what learning? Better what learning? Student from Gillian, peer from Dildora. Yeah, any other ideas? Student, effective learning. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I've actually got student hiding under there. Yeah, it is. Good. So the next one, for best what? Prepare the ground. For best what? Best results, Altaf, best practice, best learning, best impact. Yeah, okay, brilliant. I've got results, but many of the things you're writing are plausible. So for best results, you need to prepare the ground. And that links back to what we said about creating the right environment and thinking about a timeline and who's involved in the decisions and considering the input. All of those are really very important. Right, next one. Check for what as you what. I think Altaf has seen this presentation before. So Altaf is saying impact and progress. Somebody's saying result, that would also work. Yeah, I think I've got impact. Yeah, so check for impact. That was the very important word that we had earlier in the presentation. So check for impact as you progress over time. It's really important that you keep checking that what you're doing is actually working. And the last one is actually one word, a big word with I've gapped out the beginning and the end. Altaf says implementation. Somebody else says improvement. Why not lapses? I'm not sure, Mohammed, what you're referring to. But yeah, it's actually improvements. Allow time for improvements in order to consolidate whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, which brings me to the end. There's my references, so you can see I didn't make it up. Lots of research to support what I've been talking about. So a very big thank you to everybody. And I think we've still got a little bit of time, maybe 10 minutes or so. I'm really happy to answer your questions.
Actually, we only have about 5 minutes
Okay,
because we have another session 5
Sure.
minutes after this finishes.
sure. Okay. Are you going to ask the questions, Anne, or do I need to do it any different?
I'm asking them to please type their questions in the chat box,
Okay.
and then we'll be happy to read them to you, but it must be in the chat box.
Okay. What are the
Thank you.
requirements to be a CELTA
Okay.
tutor?
Here's one. Having a lot of students in class is challenging when it comes to discipline and order in class, especially since they're using their devices. What can we do about that?
I think at the end of the day, the teacher is the classroom manager. The teacher knows their students. They need to know what works and what doesn't work. When you say using their devices, I don't know if you mean using them for learning or using them for getting in touch on social media with their friends. But if they're using them for learning, then absolutely, why not? I think we should encourage that. If they're using them for social media, then I think as a classroom manager, you need to stop that from happening. It is challenging. It is challenging to maintain discipline. It is challenging to maintain order. But every context is different, and there isn't one thing that's going to work. But obviously, engagement, enjoyment, these are key things. We need to keep our students engaged. We need to keep them doing things which are at their level. I think very often we lose discipline and we lose order because we're asking students to do things which they can't actually do. They don't have the language, so they're lost. They can't complete the task, and of course they're likely to go off in another direction if they can't do what's actually being required of them. It's very difficult to answer in a short space of time, but I hope that's been useful.
Okay, here's another question. Do you think there might be beliefs that teachers have that might not be able to change due to training courses?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we all have beliefs and ideas that we're maybe fixated with is not the right word. It sounds very negative, but I do think we have ideas that we don't want to change. It's difficult to change, and with all due respect, and I'm not criticizing, but I think teachers are often not keen to change because change can be challenging. It can be time consuming, it can be frightening, it's risky. So yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, learning can't be forced. Change can't be forced. People have to want to do it, and if they don't want to do it, okay, fine. Life's going to go on, but we can all do things better. And maybe if we try, a little bit, you don't have to make big changes, but make little changes, and it might actually make your life easier.
Okay, what is the best way to motivate teachers to pursue CPD?
I think the best way to motivate teachers is to help teachers to understand that by continuing to develop themselves as teachers, it can actually make life easier in the classroom. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? We've said this, in the last 50 minutes. It's really important that teachers take things into the classroom. If teachers are coming to a workshop or Tesol Kuwait and then just forgetting it, then they're not giving anything an opportunity. So, I just mentioned with the previous question about risk, you've got to make that risk. You've got to take the risk. You've got to face the challenge. Try things out in a different way. Give things a chance, because if you don't give things a chance, you're never going to know if it's going to work or not. So that will be, it's a bit like learning a language, isn't it? The best language learners are the ones who take risks. If people are worried about making mistakes, then they're probably not going to learn languages or anything for that matter particularly well. I think the same is true for teachers. We need to take little risks.
Okay, thank you all very much for attending this session. Thank you so much, Peter. It was really informative. Great session.
Thank you.
We have 3 parallel sessions coming up at 3:45. Please go to the conference schedule on the Tesol Kuwait homepage. Click on the little tab for the conference schedule, and you can click on the link for the presentation that you want. Remember, session was recorded. And in a few days, it will be uploaded to the conference schedule where, but you, instead of a Zoom link, you'll get a link to watch it, and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Thank you again. Appreciate your attendance. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.